He's out now. The terror has just begun. Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you for another one of my famous movie / Blu-ray reviews. Today I'll be reviewing the movie and Blu-ray of... Am I covering up the title there? What's this called? Silent Madness. First I'll talk about the movie, then I'll talk about the Blu-ray that was released this year. Pretty sure it was early this year by Vinegar Syndrome. So my history with this movie doesn't go back very far. Basically this year on my channel I started, because it was just winters are so dreary and drab, I started a YouTube live stream radio show, and one of, where people can show up in the chat and participate and really drive the show. It's very much a chat-driven radio show. Someone brought up this title, and if I knew anything about it and was aware of the Syndrome release that was either upcoming or it had just happened or something like that, and I said, no, but I'm definitely interested in it being a 3D movie and going to be released or had just been released in, digital 3D Blu-ray release and 3 different versions, digital 3D, Anaglyph 3D, and just 2D Blu-ray release. And I'm like, no, I'm definitely interested in that. Like 84 slasher movie, director of photography, same guy who did Friday the 13th Part 3, also of course being in 3D, definitely interested in it. And luckily someone had, I think the Blu-ray had come out by Vinegar Syndrome, but it wasn't available yet on Amazon. I think that's what it was. And then some kind soul had actually ripped the Blu-ray and put it up on YouTube, so I was able to watch it for free on YouTube, the widescreen Vinegar Syndrome version, 2D, but I mean, obviously you get the drift. And I liked it enough where I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to buy this. I wasn't really keen on the price that Vinegar Syndrome was selling it for, so I hope to get it for cheaper on Amazon, and I did just that. I waited a little bit, and originally seeing it on YouTube, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool and fun, and this and that, and having gotten the Blu-ray, I'm like, oh wow, this is cool, the 3D is amazing. I'll talk more about that, obviously, in my Blu-ray review portion of this review. But the premise of this movie is, it's really kind of goofy and just, it's one of these low-budget movies that was filmed in the East Coast in New York, and there's some faces from the East Coast from the early 80s that's like, Kathy Kami from Sleepaway Camp, and also Paul D'Angelo from Sleepaway Camp, and also that one guy who's a homeless person in Chud, and he's also in Basket Case 2, the guy with the missing some teeth and stuff. He doesn't have a talking part in this movie, but he can just be seen standing there at this nut house exterior nut house scene. So there's some familiar East Coast faces in this movie. There's probably other ones as well, but those are the ones that I notice, that I've seen from other movies and stuff. So the premise of this movie is very simple. It's basically revolves around a mental asylum, and they've like computer errors. That's another fun thing about this movie, is it's got early 80s computer technology in it, very much like with movies like Tron and Scanners and stuff like that. We get to see the black screen with the green numbers or letters going across the computer screen, early 80s computers. But the computer made an error. I don't know if it was a human error or computer error, but it's kind of a funny premise where they meant to release a patient by the name of John Howard or something, and who was no longer. They're trying to thin out the mental patient load by releasing some of the non-dangerous mental patients into the world, so they have more space and more opportunity to concentrate on the more dangerous mental patients, which only makes sense, right? So meaning to release John Howards, they accidentally release Howard Johns, the maniacal, psychotic killer of 20 years ago, killed a bunch of girls at a sorority house or something like that. So it's kind of funny how it's like, oh no, we tried to release John Howards and accidentally released Howard Johns. It's just like, when I first saw it on YouTube in the early this year, I was seeing it for the first time, I was that was a delightful a little detail that kind of just makes you smile to yourself, and that's just so cool, stupid. It's just so awesome. And another person who's in this movie, this might be one of her first movies, is Elizabeth Ketan, or I don't know how to, it's one of those last names, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but she would go on to be in, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 and Friday the 13th Part 7 and is it Nightwish or something like that. It seems to me like I've seen her in more movies, but maybe I haven't seen her in more movies. But, you know, obviously for me, she's probably the most well known from, you know, as Robin from Friday the 13th Part 7. But she makes an all too brief appearance in this movie as Howard John's first victim after, you know, 20 years after newly escaping from and I don't think he escaped, I guess he was released from the, you know, the nut house or mental asylum or whatever. So that's basically the premise. I think from what I understand, you know, he had 20 years earlier or something, he had killed some co-eds at this sorority house, and he was institutionalized after that, and the movie begins 20 years later when he's, I guess, via computer error, he's accidentally released. And there's this pretty sexy-ass psychiatrist lady played by, I want to say, Belinda Montgomery, who's just like, when I first saw it on YouTube, I'm like, oh mama, she's kind of like a Beverly D'Angelo clone, you know. She very much reminds me of Beverly D'Angelo, just face, and she's got a nice pair of, you know what, and overall like nice kind of body. But she's probably like, I don't know what she is in this movie, late 20s, early 30s in this movie or something like that. But it's, you know, it's fun that, you know, we have her to look at throughout the course of the whole movie. But so the movie basically revolves around that, you know, this maniacal killer is accidentally released, and he ends up finding his way back to that, you know, that school slash sorority house that he did all his demented deeds in 20 years earlier, and goes back to just, I don't know, kind of like, I guess, Halloween ripoff to a certain extent, just, you know, or even possibly Friday the 13th, just go back and kill more girls at this school slash sorority house because that's where he was wronged. There's a flashback scene in this where, you know, he was kind of like a maintenance man or a janitor at the school grounds or something like that, and kind of a timid, shy mute or something like that. This is kind of like a ripoff of Friday the 13th. And there's actually some elements, there's some more elements about it that's kind of a ripoff of Friday the 13th that I'm not going to spoil. It occurs to me with a title like this that a lot of people watching this might have not seen this movie, so I don't want to spoil all the details, but I will say that if you haven't seen it and you end up seeing it, you'll understand what I mean. Or if you have seen it, you'll understand what I mean, while there's about the fact that there's even more kind of Friday the 13th ripoff aspects of this movie. But there's a flashback that's supposed to take place probably in the early 60s where, you know, some of these sorority girls do an initiation in the basement. They always do that. I guess they're you know, sorority initiations in the basement, which is a great place for 3D depth with all the pipes sticking out and this and that, and tracking, you know, in front of pipes. And, you know, this movie does a lot of great 3D gimmicks I'll get into on the Blu-ray review portion of it. But and you know, they caught, you know, Howard John's, you know, like looking, kind of peeping in on what they're doing, you know, spanking the pledges, or I don't know if sororities are pledges as well, probably, maybe, I don't know, but spanking the girls who are being initiated and stuff like that. And they end up seeing that he's peeping on them, so they kind of, you know, tease him with their tatas and end up spanking him, and he ends up, you know, well, I guess we'll just say he's purported to have murdered these girls, which may or may not be the case. That's all I'll say about that. But regardless of him being responsible for their deaths or not, he ends up, you know, being put into the nut house for 20 years and comes back and you know, resumes his maniacal mayhem, which is funny because 20 years later, the girls aren't still going to be there unless they're really horrible students. But what's funny about that is it makes sense, because if you're, you know, mental case psychotic, you won't think about something so basic as that. So, you know, I saw this movie for the first time in the early part of the year, and then I got the Blu-ray and saw it again in its 3D glory and stuff, and haven't watched it for months. So I rewatched it recently in 3D, of course, because that's how it was meant to be experienced and stuff. And I gotta say, upon my recent revisiting of it, it's just like, you know, and I had this problem with it a little bit when I first saw it too, is the structure of the movie, I think, is very faulty, in the sense that, you know, it starts out really fun, and there's like 2 kills right towards the beginning and stuff like that, and then it's like, then it goes into this, the mid part of the movie is just, it almost like it's 2 different movies. The beginning is like a slasher movie, mid part is like almost some kind of just a Nancy Drew trying to, you know, this sexy ass, and, you know, it is fun to look at, you know, watch the sexy ass nurse character go around and try to figure out, you know, what's going on, because there's so, I don't want to get into so much of it, but, you know, the hospital's trying to cover up this mistake, and throughout the course of the movie they're just going to their, you know, it's kind of realistic in that regard, where you've got this corrupt, you know, mental hospital situation and the top staff trying to cover it up and create, you know, just reality, which is actually just pull it out of thin air, bullshit out of thin air, and what happened, and this and that. I don't want to go into all of it, but it's kind of like it becomes her versus the hospital, you know, higher ups, and she goes on this kind of crusade to solve the mystery of, like, because they're saying he wasn't released, he was actually killed and cremated, and so she's on this mystery to see if, like, if he's out there, and if he's, you know, on the loose and killing people, if he's alive, or if he really is cremated and dead. And so the middle part of this movie kind of gets, you know, let's not mince words, kind of gets boring. But I do, you know, because this chick is kind of sexy to look at and stuff, and she ends up meeting this guy, and I don't know who this, I want to say I've seen this guy in possibly other stuff, but regardless, I do like the guy who ends up playing this guy, who works at the small town newspaper or whatever, that she kind of pairs up with, and kind of a very, very, very super subtle romantic interest or whatever. I like the guy who plays that character, and since she's sexy and fun to look at, it's really not that big a deal. But for slasher fans, just be warned that, I mean, the middle part of this movie really kind of just, you know, it starts as a slasher movie, the middle part turns into just, I don't know what, just rom-com kind of Nancy Drew, you know, sexy chick, late 20s, early 30s chick trying to find out, solve a mystery, and then at the end again it kind of turns back into a slasher movie with some more kills of, you know, the sorority girls and stuff. It's funny how Kathy Kami from Sleepaway Camp, who plays Meg in Sleepaway Camp, it's fun to see her around the same age as a character who's not so much of a bitch, but she spends basically the whole movie trying to, you know, start her vacation. This movie takes place at, you know, at the school / sorority house situation where the girls are off on vacation, and it's very much with, like, that other movie by David Hess, the To All the Good Night. The movie kind of takes place at the sorority house when the majority of the girls are gone, and it just, you know, the ones that remaining are the ones who are killed by the Howard Johns character. But, you know, Kathy Kami character just spends the whole movie trying to get out of there and start her vacation, and poor girl never gets to. Luckily she doesn't end up dying in this movie, which is kind of fun. But the last outfit she wears in the movie, incidentally, she looks like really good in it. The first outfit she wears in the movie, her pants are like way too high and she doesn't look very good at all, but some of the other outfits she wears in the movie I think she looks great in. I think the other ones she looks great in. The first outfit you see her in is just like, but anyway, there's some interesting 3D kills in this movie. Early on in the movie, you see Paul D'Angelo in his early 80s buffness. And it's funny how, you know, although I'm a heterosexual male and stuff, it's funny how you never get to see Mr. Muscle Paul D'Angelo without a shirt in Sleepaway Camp. Well, to all you gals, or maybe gay guys, you do get to see Paul D'Angelo in the early 80s shirtless in this movie very briefly, and I gotta say their little, you know, him and his girlfriend are like camping out in their van, and it's a day scene. It doesn't last very long, but they end up being killed by Howard Johns in all 3D fun glory and stuff like that, and that's fun and stuff. And I guess it turns out that the girl who's, you know, dies in this scene ends up being Kathy Kami's character's sister, and she goes back to that location to see her, you know, Paul D'Angelo and her sister dead in a ditch, and it's just kind of, the girl does a good job just sitting in a ditch in this funky position, you know, all still and stuff like that. So this movie is funny, and then what another amusing part about the movie is there's these two henchmen of kind of like the hospital, these two evil henchmen that the hospital ends up, you know, sending out. And also, before I even talk about that, I'll briefly talk about this funny scene where it's like, early on in the movie, this Belinda Montgomery character goes down in this one ward, I don't know if it's Ward L or something like that, where it's just so convoluted, like the most dangerous serial killers at the hospital are in Ward L or something like that, and they're just like zipped up in plastic bags, and they're just kept on life support, and they're just vegetables, and there's this one guy in a bag who does this funny thing where I can't remember what, if he's doing it. Oh, I think he's pushing his head up, like he's got his hands up against the bag. They're all on like gurneys in these bags, alive, and he's got like, it's kind of like a see-through body bag. I don't know what the hell these are, but he's got his hands up on the bag on his back and is like pushing his head up, I think, and down, and it's just like so funny how they've got all these characters on, on these gurneys, some in, zipped up bags, some not, just going like, doing this stuff. So it's like this hospital is like this evil, and once again, kind of a little bit of truth in this aspect of the movie. This hospital is in an evil situation where they got Ward L or whatever it is. That's like, off limits except for, people with clearance or whatever. That they just got these people that are basically more or less on life support, just vegetables, just keeping them alive for no reason. There's these two henchmen that kind of make the midsection of this movie fun, where, and one of them's got this just clearly, East Coast fun, like East Coast New York accent and stuff, and the other guy is just kind of a balding guy, evil guy who does this like funny laugh thing and stuff like that. But they end up, the higher ups at the hospital end up sending these two out to basically go capture and kill Howard Johns, and if they find the Belinda Montgomery character, might as well kill her as well because she knows about the cover-up and stuff. So that kind of makes the middle part of the movie a little bit more easy to get through, because those two characters are just so funny. And when they finally end up coming across, Howard Johns, and I don't know, the way the one guy goes out, the guy with the cattle prod, who's got some funny dialogue, 3D cattle prod into the camera, the way he goes out with the drill in the back of the head is like worth, pretty much almost the whole price of this Blu-ray. That moment is really cool, and it's great to see that guy get his, and how I think that Howard Johns sets up the drill press to kind of like come on when the electricity switched on, and the other guy, they don't know, about that it's set up this way, and the one guy's like, turn on the lights, and he's got Belinda Montgomery laid down there and he's like gonna take her clothes off and do whatever to her while she's unconscious before they kill her, which is just so nasty. And he tells his buddy to turn on the lights, and as soon as he turns on the lights, his head's under the drill, and the drill starts, and the thing goes down and drills him in the back of the head, which is a cool ass moment. So those two guys make the middle of the movie a little easier to get through, I guess, to a certain extent. But I do want to stress that the middle part of the movie, as I said, the middle part of the movie is kind of a little difficult to get through. The beginning's fun and like the ending's fun, but the middle, I don't use drugs or drink alcohol myself, but those of you who do, you might want to get your drugs and alcohol out in the middle to help you get through it. But it's funny how towards the end of the movie, those two evil hospital guys are almost more dangerous than Howard Johns, but I think Howard Johns dispatches them, and all's well that ends well. Oh, before I end the review of the movie portion of this, I want to also comment on. I talked about a little bit on the radio show. For whatever reason, they have the Belinda Montgomery character driving this ancient old MG convertible car, probably from the 40s or 50s. I have no idea, where they got this, why the hell they're having her drive this old freaking like collectible car. It's just so nonsensical. Probably just someone on production had the car, I would imagine, and they're like, oh, here, this would be cool to put in the movie. Because I can't imagine that, it was in the script or anything like that. This character has to drive like a 40s or 50s era, MG convertible. It's just like so kind of funny and just ridiculous. And another thing, if you've seen One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or whatever the hell the title of that is, that there's the guy who plays like the sheriff in this movie is with that fat, I think he's a fat nut job in that movie as well. So that's another familiar face from a movie's past. If you've seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I think that's what it's called. But the star rating for this movie, I'll probably just go 2 out of 4 stars for Silent Madness, because I don't know, the middle part of the movie, it's just so weird how it's almost like 2 movies in one. The beginning and the end are like a slasher movie, and the middle is Nancy Drew / very super subtle love story, and this newspaper guy and this sexy ass Belinda Montgomery character getting to know each other, and it's just like, I don't know. And another thing about, I kind of liked it when I first saw it, the music. But having just rewatched it again, the music actually kind of gets annoying. It's almost like one theme, just like and it's almost like they just made that one theme that's like maybe, I don't know, 45 seconds long and just kept repeating it over and over. It's like it actually gets annoying where you know, by the time, you know, halfway through the movie, especially by the time the movie's over, you're really kind of just sick of hearing that piece of music, in my opinion. So I guess that'll pretty much do it for my movie review of the movie. Now on to my review of the Blu-ray that's still kind of recently released, that just came out by, you know, within the past year here, by Vinegar Syndrome, which, you know, I wouldn't recommend necessarily the movie, but I would highly recommend the Blu-ray. And I guess to a certain extent, part of my recommendation of the movie would be to like people who have access to, you know, the digital 3D version, meaning if you got a 3D TV or projector and a way to play the 3D aspect of the Blu-ray. Obviously, a release like this, for me, the movie in 2D probably wouldn't be nearly as great as the 3D aspect. And so many times with a low-budget 3D movie and stuff, especially being able to watch it in digital 3D at home, you know, the movie itself in 2D might not be that great, but, you know, being able to see a bad movie in 3D might make the movie a lot more easier to get through. And that's very much the case with this movie. The digital 3D presentation of this movie on Blu-ray is absolutely stunning. And just like with Friday the 13th Part 3, you know, it's early 80s 3D, so I mean the depth is just stunning and really, really amazing. I think I found by the time the movie was over, when I watched it recently, I think there was a little bit of eye strain for me. Like Friday the 13th Part 3, the digital 3D version that came out of that last year, like, because that for me I can watch all the way through with the digital 3D without like having any eye strain, because there's a perfect balance in that movie for me of like 3D stuff, really, really nice depth in 3D, and also just stuff where there's scenes where it's not very 3D at all, where it's in a good way, you know, stuff that doesn't feel, scenes that don't feel like they have to push 3D, whereas this is, it could be good or bad, but this one is actually probably more heavy, more consistent 3D, just in terms of just not so much always stuff coming at you, but just scenes, you know, people will be positioned, you know, girls at the sorority house, you know, girls will be positioned like one like here in front of you, and just people, you know, when they have meetings at the nut house or whatever, just they'll place a plant here, or a, you know, one of those scales with the one thing on either side, or the phone, or, you know, they'll just place things around where they're like constantly making use of the depth. So it's not like it's always stuff poking out, but the, you know, the depth is pretty much always there, which I guess is a good thing if you're, you know, if you're investing in a 3D projector / TV and Blu-ray player and the 3D disc. But, you know, for me, it gets a little taxing on the eyes. It's usually a movie that's this 3D heavy, like constantly. I kind of generally tend to watch one half and then go away, and then maybe the next day or something finish it, because it tends to be too much 3D for like 90 minutes straight for me, this particular release. But I can't stress how absolutely amazing the digital 3D looks on this release. It's top, super top notch, you know, frickin' presentation of the 3D version. And I think, you know, I watched the special features in the spring whenever I got the disc, and I want to say that the release of this movie was so botched that I don't think it was even theatrically. I think first of all, I think the theatrical release was very, very super duper limited. And I also think beyond that, I don't think it was even released theatrically in 3D, which was just a freaking bummer to make a 3D movie. Like this, you know, this Blu-ray release is probably one of the first ways to actually see this movie in 3D, which is just insane. Nearly 40 years later, we can finally experience it in the way it was meant to be seen in 3D. So we can see here on the back, Vinegar Syndrome presents Silent Madness on Blu-ray, newly restored from its original 3D camera negative and presented in digital 3D, flat 2D, and Anaglyph 3D, which you can enjoy with your custom pair of 3D glasses included with this disc. So obviously, taken from the original 3D camera negative, you know, speaks volumes as to why this looks absolutely amazing. And I will say that, you know, having been in the 3D TV and 3D Blu-ray game for the last 10 years, and having experienced several, not a whole hell of a lot of 3D movies, but you know, a good amount of 3D movies. I will say that, you know, this very much like with, you know, Amityville 3D and stuff that came out years ago on in Blu-ray and digital 3D. It is a really, it's early 80s freaking 3D, so it's very, very healthy 3D with just an amount of depth that, you know, you pretty much have to see to believe. And one wouldn't think a movie this low budget would actually be in stereo in 1984, but believe it or not, this movie, I can only assume this movie was originally, you know, mixed in you know, the stereo version of this movie was something that happened in 84. But this Blu-ray is actually in, you know, 2-channel stereo, which actually also adds to the fun. It's ironic that, you know, a much more high-profile movie like Friday the 13th Part 3 that came out, what was it, 2 years prior, is mono, and then 2 years later this much more low-budget production is actually, you know, I guess finished in 3D. Not only that, but stereo sound, kind of fun. Looking at the special features here, we've got newly recorded commentary track with the director, commentary track with Hysteria Continues, which I never listened to, Method to the Madness, a 45-minute making-of documentary featuring interviews with the cast and crew, deleted interviews from Method to the Madness, Silent Stalking Grounds, locations featurette introduction by the director, promotional 3D sizzle reel for Silent Madness, promotional and behind-the-scenes still gallery, multiple radio spots. Includes 2 pairs of custom Silent Madness Anaglyph glasses, reversible cover artwork, and English SDH subtitles. So just like it says on the back, you've got 2 cover art options. You've got this particular cover art option or this cover art, which doesn't do much for me at all. Incidentally, this cover art almost seems familiar. It seems like, yeah, I don't know, I don't think this is even Howard Johns. This is more like one of the higher up guys at the hospital or something. I don't know who this is supposed to be, but this cover art kind of reminds me of a music album I can't think of. But the basic design of this cover art is very familiar to me, but you know, for the record, I much prefer this cover art. Opening up the case, we've got 2 discs. This one features the digital 3D version and the 2D version. Incidentally, if you put it in your 3D Blu-ray player on your 3D TV, it automatically, from what I've experienced, plays 3D. And I don't think there's any way on the menu, on the disc itself, to watch 2D on your 3D TV. You pretty much have to just turn off the 3D on the TV itself to watch it in 2D probably. This one features 3D, and this is the one you'd watch for 2D if you don't have a 3D TV or player. This is the disc that features the Anaglyph version that you use with the 2 pairs of included glasses, and also this disc features the special features as well. The 3D glasses for this release look very much like this. As a matter of fact, they look absolutely exactly like this. You've got the word Silent Madness in 3D printed on the front there, and printed on each side of the part that goes over your ears. You've got the artwork that I like on one side, and then the artwork that I don't like on the other side. Inside the glasses, you'll see that it's just nothing but black. Obviously, this is the ultimate release of Silent Madness. It's crazy that it took nearly 40 years for this to come out, but what a release it is. I mean, 3 viewing options, you know, 2D for those unfortunate folks who don't have a 3D TV or player or projector or any means to watch the digital 3D version. The digital 3D version, which is a way to experience the way the movie was meant to be experienced in the early 80s, but from what I understand never actually came out to be theatrically distributed 3D, which is just a shame. Not that I can imagine many people would have saw it anyway necessarily. And then a way for the majority of the people who unfortunately don't have a way to experience digital 3D, they can experience the Anaglyph 3D version, which I tried a little bit of and gives you the same general idea of the 3D, but I'll be damned if I could watch a whole movie at one time with Anaglyph 3D glasses, and I wouldn't even recommend it. I'd pretty much recommend doing it at 5 or 10 minute increments throughout the course of several days. There's no way I could watch a whole 90-minute movie on frickin' Anaglyph glasses. It's just like insane. But at least they give you an option to do that for those people who unfortunately don't have a way to watch the digital 3D version. So I guess that pretty much does it for my review of Silent Madness movie and Blu-ray release. Hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, we'll catch you on the next video.